All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. Normally, I'd be telling you about all the events that we have coming up and guiding you to check out our website at exploringbytheseat.com to jump into events. But we have come to that point where this is our final live event of 2021. So we've been going strong with 60 live events a month since September. Hosting scientists, explorers, adventurers, and conservationists from all around the year. And we're really excited to start doing that again come January 2022. So we're going to end off today, this exploration season, with a really cool live event. We always like going out to the field, and it's always a great time where we can join the crew of the exploration vessel Nautilus. So today we're going to join them south of Hawaii as they explore a chain of seamounts. This is a 16-day expedition to generate high-quality seafloor maps and conduct ROV dives and collect geological samples to analyze later. If you don't know, the Oceanic Trust, Exploration Trust, and the Nautilus Exploration Program aim to explore the ocean, seeking out new discoveries in the fields of geology, biology, maritime history, archaeology, and chemistry while pushing the boundaries of education, outreach, and technological innovation. I'm excited to introduce our two hosts for today. We've got Megan Putz, who is a biologist at the University of Hawaii, and Abraham Currington, who is the Science Communication Fellow on board Nautilus for this expedition. So let's bring the two of them in today. Hey, how are we doing today?
Hello. Doing fairly well.
All right. Well, great to have you joining us today. We've got a great group of classrooms from across North America joining us. I'm going to let the two of you take over for a little bit. We're excited to see what's been going on with this expedition. And then I have a feeling we're going to have lots of questions for you.
All right. So I will get us started by introducing you to the vessel, and we'll talk about what's going on behind us in just a bit. So this is the exploration vessel Nautilus. This is where we are right now. Well, this is the ship that we're on right now. We're in a little container room at the very top of the ship there. This is not live footage. This is taken with a drone because right now we are, as you said, off the coast of Hawaii. We are doing a bit of rocking and rolling. The seas are a little choppy today. So exploration vessel Nautilus has two remote operated vehicles that we use to survey the seafloor. The one up front that you see is ROV Hercules. So that's the one that takes the samples, has more cameras and more lights. So it's the one that's getting all of the shots of the up-close wildlife. And in the back there, the silver one is called Argus. And Argus is the eye in the sky for Hercules. So it sits about 12 meters above Hercules and surveys conditions and provides us some very cool atmospheric shots of the seafloor.
The other really important purpose of Argus is it sort of compensates for the heave of the ship on the surface so that Hercules can do its work on the seafloor without being pulled or moved, so it can move about freely.
That is very important on days like today where it's very windy. If we have anybody that's very interested in mechanics, here is a exploded view of Hercules and Argus. So these are all the parts that go into each of the ROVs. I'll zoom ahead a little bit. Everybody always skips Argus, and I feel sad because Argus is really cool. It is a less complex vehicle, but it's still amazing. Spin a bit. So you see the main camera there, and that's what's providing the Argus view when you watch us on nautiluslive.org. So if you are wondering how we are able to talk to you from the middle of the ocean, I was curious about that as well when I first started going to sea. The big golf ball on the top, it's our Wi-Fi connection. So you've got our whole telepresence system. There's a cable that runs down to both of the ROVs. So here we have Hercules doing the sampling and videoing of the seafloor. That information goes up to Argus and then up to the ship where, again, the signal is sent out by that golf ball shaped item on the deck. up to a satellite and down to a satellite substation. And that broadcasts to your classroom, your facility, wherever you happen to be right now. So that is how we are able to communicate with you. Just a bit more. So what I was talking about Argus surveying Hercules from above. So this is a shot from Argus. So it looks down on Hercules as it surveys things. Right, I'm not sure where it was there. It looks like a bit of a tight spot. So Argus would have been very helpful in keeping Hercules safe, and that's basically the point. That's why it's called Argus. It was the name of the many-eyed giant in Greek mythology. Keeps an eye on Hercules. And so it also provides us a different perspective on things. Like, for example, this stalked sponge, you might think it's small. Hercules is probably about 7 feet tall, so it's the size of a small car. And so this sponge then is quite large, but we probably might not have known that just looking at it. And Megan, you want to talk about some of the biology we've been seeing on this cruise?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are surveying a chain of unnamed seamounts south of the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument. And on these seamounts, we expect to see a lot of deep sea corals and sponges. And particularly at the top of these seamounts, we've been finding some very high density communities of corals and sponges. And these are very important ecosystems in the deep sea, and they provide shelter and habitat for a number of associate animals, like echinoderms, like sea stars, brittle stars, sea cucumbers, and urchins, and other things like fish and a number of other animals. So we see crustaceans crawling on this sponge, like opossum shrimps and amphipods. We have feather stars, there are brittle stars, and this is a euplectellid glass sponge called Walteria that we are looking at currently. And as we zoom in, you can see more and more detail and more animals. Here we have another glass sponge. This one is a bolosoma.
Is it because it's shaped like a bowl? Is that why?
That's a good point. It could be. A lot of times these names that the animals get are related to what they look like or what they do. Here we're looking at a bubblegum coral, which got its name because the ends of the branches look like little balls of bubblegum. And on top of it, this yellow coral is a zoanthid coral called Bulagomizoanthus because it lives on bubblegum coral. And here's an example of one of those high density communities that we've been seeing. Here we have a bunch of bamboo coral and sponges growing very close together in the deep sea. And this is a field of pink coral known as coral, or in the family Corallidae. And this is a particularly dense bed of these corals, and they're quite beautiful. One of my favorite fishes that we might see on some of our dives are the chimeras, or also known as ghost sharks. They're neither sharks nor true fishes. They're in their own group, and they're quite fun to look at. Another group of animals that we often see are polychaete worms or bristle worms. This one is Tuthidodrillis, which is also known as the squid worm. It got its name because it has these long palps, those sort of tentacle-like structures on the head of this worm. So there are a lot of variety of animals here, and we have only just scratched the surface of learning about them and surveying their communities.
So on this cruise, we are also looking for geologic samples. And actually, I'm going to pop you over. So right behind me is the control van. So we'll give you a look at what the control van looks like. So there's a crew, the very back row or front row, technically. The farthest row away from you right now is where our ROV pilots are and our navigator and our video tech. And in the back row, that's where we sit, the science team. So I'm going to show you what we're currently looking at on the seafloor. This is what we're seeing. Lots of big rock formations here. On the other seamounts that we've been looking at, there's been kind of a smaller, more pebbly. I won't. No, I don't want to call them pebbles because the rocks are actually large, but to us they kind of look like a sea of pebbles that are scattered about.
Well, there are different formations geologically. So on this dive, we've been seeing a lot of pillow flows. Pillows are a type of formation that occurs when lava is extruded underwater. And it forms these lobate, rounded, sort of bulbous structures. And then we've also been seeing nodules, which are small pebble-like rock formations that form by precipitating minerals out of the water.
So that is what we are up to out on the seafloor. And then the samples that we're taking, be they rock or biologic, they head to our wet lab. Nobody's in there right now, but Megan, you want to talk about what goes on in the wet lab?
So later, when we recover the vehicles, we will also be recovering all of our samples and bringing them and processing them here in the wet lab. So we have our refrigerators. That's where we store our biological samples until it's time to process them. It's important to keep them cold so that they stay intact until they can be properly preserved and cataloged to be sent to the repositories. And then we also have our rock samples that will also be dried, cleaned, and get gotten ready to be sent to their repository. So our job here is to make sure everything is properly labeled and described so that they can be sent away to scientists who will be studying them.
That's what we've got going on. We can definitely explain more, but we would love to take whatever questions you've got about science, sea life, whatever may come to mind.
All right, sounds great. Before we start jumping into some classrooms, I want to check up on a few things. One, I know we talked a little about Hercules and Argus, and I'm wondering for the classrooms who are tuning in about how deep. What's Hercules' max depth? How deep can Hercules get down there?
Yeah, so Hercules has a max depth rating of about 4,000 meters. That's some 2 point something miles. I keep meaning to do that calculation and not doing it. Argus can go deeper, something like 6,000 meters, but the very bottom of the seafloor is something like 10,000 meters. So our ROVs wouldn't be able to make it to the Challenger Deep or anything.
All
But
right.
just for context, the average sea depth is about 3,800 meters. And if you were to go 6,000 meters, that's going to cover close to 99% of the seafloor.
Okay. Well, speaking of that seafloor, I know right now you use the ROVs to kind of explore, or sorry, the sonar, the mapping sonar first to kind of explore an area, and then the ROVs can kind of go in afterwards when you have a bit better idea of what's going on. I'm wondering, can you give our students just a rough estimate of how much of the seafloor we've mapped so far, or how further we still have to go?
I had a mapping slide and I just realized it got moved to the side. We have mapped about 20%, which is
All right.
a big jump from just a few years ago.
Very cool. Well, let's start taking a few questions. We're also going to take a little pause after a few questions as well to do a quick Kahoot quiz based on some of the things you shared with us today. We'll see how well the classrooms have been paying attention. If you're tuning in live via YouTube, don't forget to use that chat sidebar and send us in your questions. But for now, we'll get started with a few of our camera classes. So I'm going to start off with Mr. Shattuck's crew. They're in Chalk River, Ontario, in Canada. I'm going to bring them in now. There they are. How are we doing, Chalk River?
Good, you?
Good.
My question is, what happens if you lost Hercules? If the line snapped, what would you do?
That's a very good question, and that actually happened recently. So what happened was the termination on Argus parted, which caused both vehicles to go down to the seafloor. And they were able to mobilize the ROV Jason to come out and rescue Argus and Hercules. What they did first was they sent Jason down to survey what it looked like on the sea floor. And then they were able to cut the tether between Argus and Hercules. After the tether was cut, Hercules is actually positively buoyant, which means that it'll eventually float to the surface. So once Hercules reached the surface, they were able to recover it to the ship. And then Jason went down and connected a cable to Argus in order to hoist it up from the seafloor. Argus is very heavy, it's weighted, so we needed to use our winch in order to bring it all the way up to the surface.
All right, great question to start us off. I'm looking in the back, looks like a sea star was just spotted on the camera there, which is kind of cool. We're going to jump to another classroom now. Mrs. Hood's 5th graders are hanging out with us right now, and they are joining us from Hatboro, Pennsylvania. Let's bring them into the call. How are we doing, Pennsylvania?
Good. My question is, what's your favorite part of your job?
Favorite part of our job? Favorite part of my job is I get to interact with all sorts of different people, so all sorts of different ages and groups. Even the people on the ship, we've got engineers, ROV pilots, our chef, so it's fun to interact with a bunch of different types of people.
One of my favorite things is getting to explore places that people have never seen before. So every dive, we're going to a place that's new, especially this seamount that we're exploring today. No one has ever been here before, so that's really exciting to me. And oftentimes on these dives, we find brand new species that have never been seen before or described by scientists in the past. So it's exciting to be the first to see and share these experiences.
Yeah, the seamount doesn't even have a name. It's unnamed Seamount F.
All right, very cool. Mr. Hergott's crew is tuning in live via YouTube, and they want to know at where you are now, how long does it take Hercules and Argus to get to the bottom from the surface?
So that really depends on how deep we're going. Today, we started at a depth of 3,300 meters. And so it took, I think, about 3 hours to get down that deep.
Coming up is
a little bit slower.
Yeah.
So going down, Hercules can descend at a rate of about 30 meters a minute. And then coming back up, we're a little bit slower, between 15 and 20 meters a minute.
All right, let's grab another classroom here. Let's go to Mr. McGill's crew. They're in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Some 6th graders hanging out with us. Let's get them into the call. There they are. Hey, 6th graders, how are you doing?
The question that we have is, how many sea animals do you see every day?
On average.
On average.
Oh, how many? Well, I've never really counted before. We do see a lot, and it depends on every dive is a little bit different. So in terms of species, we might see, 50 or 60 different species in a dive or more. And then depending on the community that we're surveying, we might see thousands of animals or only a handful of them. So right now, while we're very deep, we're not seeing as many animals as we'll probably see later when we're at the top of the seamount.
Okay, good question. Let's go to Aurelia now. We've got some 5th and 6th graders hanging out in Aurelia. I'm going to pop them into the live stream. There they are. Hey, Aurelia, how we doing?
Hi.
Do I need to unmute?
We got you. We can hear you, bud.
Oh, have you guys ever gotten scared when you're down in the ocean?
Have we gotten scared?
We're personally not in the ocean. We send a remote operated vehicle, basically a robot, down for us, and we have the cameras to see. But do we get scared watching? I'm just excited to see what we're gonna find. Like, I can't imagine a creature that we'd come across that I'd be afraid of.
Yeah.
So like, oh my goodness, look at that.
I think the only thing I would be really afraid of is if we found fishing gear or line that is hooked on the seamount, because that could be a possible entanglement hazard for the ROV, which means that we might not be able to recover it. So that would be really scary to me.
Okay. Grabbing another question here. We're going to go to Miss Erickson's crew in Stafford, Connecticut. Looks like some 5th graders. Let's bring them in there live. Hey, Connecticut.
Hi. What is the coolest thing you have found on the ocean floor?
Oh, the coolest thing. That one's always a hard one because I think everything is cool. But one of my favorite Nautilus moments is when we saw the gulper eel. And they were in the monument surveying a seamount, and this large gulper eel came into view, and it was all inflated like it was about to eat something, or maybe it was trying to scare us away. And it was just sort of floating there, and then all of a sudden it shrank down and swam away.
All right, very cool. We're going to take a little pause right now. We're going to play a little Kahoot action with our classrooms, and then we have more to visit and a couple crews in Wisconsin. So don't worry, we didn't forget you. We're going to take a little break and get a little interactive and see how well we were paying attention today. If you are in your classroom and you're lucky enough to have one-to-one technology, iPads, tablets, Chromebooks, you can use them at your desk. If not, your teacher can bring it up at the front of the room and you can shout out answers to him or her. Or, of course, if you can't get connected at all, you can just play along anyways and shout out the answers. There's the link down there, kahoot.it. I'm going to share my screen now, and I'm going to pop up your pin for today. So here we go. Bear with me for a moment. All right. You should see that now. Our pin for today is 808-9912. We'll give a few moments to get some students in and starting to join us. So there's our pin, and I see some students coming in now. Very cool. Let's see, 4 questions today. You have 20 seconds for each question. If you get the answer right, you're going to score some points. If you get it right and you do it quickly, you'll get even more points. If you get it wrong, but you did it really fast, well, you still don't get anything. So we need those right answers as quick as you can get them in. So we're already up over 70 students. Let's see how many more join us before we go live. See if we can get over 100.
We have a viewer asking what we are looking for on this expedition. We're looking for 2 things. We're looking for rocks with this iron manganese crust, and we're collecting those along a transect, and then we're also documenting the biodiversity along the transect and collecting some specimens that have been requested by scientists.
All right. And I know it's a 16-day expedition. How far along are you? How much more time do you have out on the water?
We will be going back to port on Sunday.
That's a great question, and that's one of the questions we are attempting to answer by sampling along this transect.
Okay, we've got about 130 students in the Kahoot. Let's take things live. Here we go.
Terrain-wise? Yep. Yeah, so I just bumped us a little bit to get to the top of this ridge.
All right, first question coming up. Nautilus is currently off the southern coast of, was it Spain, Tahiti, Hawaii, or California? Where is Nautilus off the southern coast of? Couple more seconds. All right, about 100 of our students went with Hawaii. Good job, good start. We've got Aiden in the lead so far, but it's pretty tight. Let's jump to our next question and see what happens. So about how deep can ROV Hercules go? Was it 500 meters? Was it 4,000 meters, 200 meters, or 100 meters? About how deep could ROV Hercules go? Couple more seconds. All right, couldn't fool our students. 4,000 meters is the right answer. We have a shift. RST Bubble 78 is in the lead. Let's jump into our next question. A true or false? Corals and sponges provide shelter and habitat for marine life. Is that true or false? All right, 5 more seconds to make your choice. All right, that is true. Let's see what happened to our leaderboard. Bubbles is still holding down that top spot, but let's see. Anything can happen in our final question about how much of the deep sea has been mapped. Was it 10%, 20%, 50%, or has 80% of the deep sea, the seafloor, been mapped? All right, over 100 students went with 20%. Let's check out that final podium. Let's see where we are. Third spot, Taco Millie. Good job. Second, we've got Cold Santa Paws. And holding down that top spot, Bubbles 78. Good stuff, Bubbles 78. All right, let's come back from that screen share and let's visit a few more of our classrooms because I know there are more questions floating around out there. So let me just shut down my Kahoot. Okay. Okay. So we need to go to Wisconsin. We have a few classrooms hanging out with us in Wisconsin, in Ryle, Wisconsin, some 5th graders. So let's start off with Mrs. Kearney's group first and see what question they have for us today.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi there, he's coming. Right here. Okay. Where do you sleep?
It depends on what kind of cabin you have, but most of them have bunk beds with 2 people or 4 people in the room. And I, unfortunately, I think Megan as well, are on the top bunk this trip. So we get to climb up and down. And we do feel all the rocking and rolling of the ship as well.
It's definitely a unique challenge climbing into a bunk while it's moving.
All right, let's grab our other 5th grade crew in Wisconsin as well. I believe they're hanging out with Miss Fletcher.
How many pounds of things have you collected in the sea this trip?
How many pounds? Oh, we haven't even weighed our rocks yet. We've got probably at least 100 pounds of rocks, though. In terms of biological, maybe 1 to 2 pounds.
Okay, so we're going to grab another question here from YouTube. Miss Patterson's crew is with us, and they're wanting to know if you're seeing any garbage, any evidence of human activities.
Yes, we have seen quite a few cans, glass bottles, a flip-flop. So yeah, we do see garbage on almost every dive, unfortunately.
Okay. As we take a few more questions, I want to remind our crew that after they get off today's event, or really anytime that Nautilus is out on the water on expedition, you can visit nautiluslive.org. So when we wrap up here today, if you jump on with your classroom, you can watch some of that live dive action and even send in some questions via the chat to the crew. There'll be a science communication fellow sitting in there right now waiting for questions, and they'll be able to ask the scientists, the navigators, the ROV pilots. So definitely you can extend our event today if you spend a little time there. But let's visit a few more groups. Let's go to Mrs. Hood's. I see someone standing up there and ready to go. Nice purple coat.
Okay, thank you. What's your favorite type of coral?
My favorite type of coral. Do you have a favorite coral?
I can barely name all of the corals at this point.
I think my favorite type of coral is the gold coral. It's found here in Hawaii, and it's actually an epizoic coral, which means that it grows on top of other corals. So you can only find the gold coral if it has a host, and its host is bamboo coral. So you find this coral in shallower waters than what we're surveying today, but it can actually grow really large. And what it does is it'll find a bamboo coral, settle on it, and then overgrow the skeleton of that bamboo coral and then make its own skeleton. And they also grow extremely slowly. So they're growing at 0.3 millimeters per year. So that's like just a tiny hair's breadth each year in width. So they can live thousands and thousands of years. Some of the ones that have been collected have been dated to be well over 2,000 of years old.
All right. Wow. Very cool. I can see why you picked that as your favorite coral. That's awesome. Mr. Shattuck's crew.
Have you ever found something that no one else has and got to name it?
Oh, I wish we got to name things. We have great ideas for names. But we do, the problem with finding new things is that when we spot something we think it might be new, we have marine biologists like Megan who say that I have never seen that before. And so we collect it or collect the sample of it, and then they do some research, and then maybe a year or two from then they can decide whether it's actually new or not. And then a whole group of people gets to name things, not just one person usually.
Yeah, usually the scientist who describes it and writes the paper gets to give the input for the name, but they usually ask other scientists for input before giving the name.
All right. I know that's probably disappointing for some classes out there that it's not just you see it, you name it, that you do have to wait and there's some patience involved while the scientific community decides if it is new or not. All right. Mr. McGill's crew, Thunder Bay, do you have a follow-up for us?
Any questions, guys? Yeah? Yeah, one.
All right.
What's the rarest fish you've seen?
The worst what?
Rarest.
Fish.
Rarest.
Oh, the rarest.
Well, we did see a species the other day. It was a type of cusk eel that had never been seen in Hawaii before and had never been seen at the depth that we were at. So it was only known from the South Pacific at shallower depths, about 2,300 meters. And we saw it for the first time in Hawaii at 2,700 meters. And upon that, it had only been seen alive once before. So that was a pretty rare occurrence. And a cusk eel is a type of fish that has an eel-like body form, but it is a bony fish. And it was really cool. It had these really long fins.
All right. Very cool. And so is that considered, I guess, an extension of the range when you find it somewhere where it hasn't been seen before?
Yes. Yeah, so it definitely extended that range that we know that fish to exist in. So it was really cool.
Oh, that's great. Aurelia, Mrs. Lobb's crew, do you have another question for us? It's like we have a tiger Pikachu coming up.
Yes. What is the funniest thing you have found?
Funniest thing. Oh, well, there's the little usually it's like funny things that happen. You know, there's the eel today that was chasing after that shrimp. We thought the shrimp was getting away, but then it just kind of like walked right back into the eel's mouth and then swam away. So
Yeah. We're like, oh, he's gonna get eaten. So, oh, maybe not.
All right. Back to Ryo. I think I see another question there.
How many seamounts have you explored?
This is our third seamount of our expedition. So we are exploring these unnamed seamounts, and we are on number 3 of potentially 5.
All right. Mrs. Erickson in Connecticut, do you have a wrap up for us?
How much percentage do you cover in a day?
Oh, that's a great question. It depends on the weather conditions and what we are, then the terrain. So where the ROV has to go and how many samples we're taking and how curious we are. Because sometimes we will stop and look at like each little chunk of land. So it kind of depends. It depends on a lot of things.
Yeah, so the ROV can move as fast as half a knot, which isn't that fast. It's like a very slow walking pace. But that'll get us to cover about 1 kilometer in an hour. And we usually don't go that fast. We're usually going at 1/4 of a knot, so even slower than that. So we meander about, and throughout a whole 24 hours, we might go maybe 7 kilometers.
All right, slow and steady, and I bet that helps not to miss anything as well, going at a nice pace to cover some distance. All right, and our final question from our 5th graders in Wisconsin. Haven't had a follow-up.
Do the animals that you see ever get scared of Hercules or their partner?
Yes. So oftentimes some of these animals will react to the presence of the ROV. We see brittle stars that'll just jump off corals because they can hear it or feel Hercules coming. Earlier this morning, we scared a sea anemone. Just a little bit of brushing from the thruster, so a little bit of water moving past, and the whole sea anemone closed up. And then sometimes the cutthroat eels that we often see, when the lights shine in their eyes, they'll shake their heads and swim backwards.
All right. As we wrap up for today, one more question here from YouTube. Do you think this area of the deep sea, do you think climate change is having an impact on it, or does its depth shelter it a little bit?
So climate change will impact the deep sea, but that impact won't be felt for a longer period of time than what we're going to feel at the surface.
All right. Well, I want to start off with a shout out to our YouTube crew today. Thanks for joining us, playing Kahoot, and sending in so many great questions. I want to give a big shout out to all of our camera classes today. A great group of classrooms before the holiday. Let's pop them all in here. There they are. Hey, everyone. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Thanks for all those great questions. Great. And then, of course, a big shout out to the whole team at Ocean Exploration Trust for a great series of events since September during this expedition season. I'll pop that link up there one more time if you want to go right after today's call and take a look at what's going on. Maybe send in a few more questions if you have some. And then Megan and Abraham, thank you so much for spending some time with us, taking us out on expedition. And I hope the rest of the cruise goes well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. We're going to sign off for today. Hope everyone has a great week and a great holiday season. Thanks, everyone.